Hey gang, Professor McElroy here. Welcome to VisCom. I noticed in the grade book that everyone has completed Graphic Design 1 and Graphic Design 2. So this is in essence the triptych or the third part of kind of some basics of graphic design kind of skill set. So we've kind of navigated through the basics of Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign with Graphic Design 1. And then we kind of dove a little bit more into what I would consider like an intermediate level of a kind of design skill set, creative thinking and problem solving and kind of visual communication kind of processes and plans as a whole with Graphic Design 2 last month. And then this month, I noticed that a few of you have taken them like stacked up in sequencing, which is absolutely perfect. So you don't really take too much of a hiccup or break as we kind of now dive into VisCom, which is the more advanced chapters of your Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign books. I wouldn't say advanced skill set because we have individual classes, advertising design for Photoshop, digital illustration for Illustrator, and then our multi-page design class for InDesign, where we really cover the full gambit of beginner, intermediate, and advanced, all in 4-week crunches, which I call like boot camp style of learning the technical side of each of those 3 software applications, combined with some practical application and things like that. So this is our third part of our triptych of our kind of basics of design. And we're touching the 3 primary software applications, just like we did in Graphic Design 1 and Graphic Design 2. So you're going to notice the same Adobe Press books. We're just going to have a refresher chapter for Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign, and then jump right into 3 or 4 of the more advanced chapters. What I like to do when we get to the VisCom class level is I like to cover more kind of the thought process behind the out-of-book projects each week, because we're all veterans now with the basic structure of the book, the student files, the step-by-step process, the learning and navigating and hunting and pecking and looking and learning process of the Adobe Press books. Really, honestly, at the end of this course, if you wished, which we don't require, but some students explore and want to do, is that you could become an Adobe certified expert or an ACE expert by taking the Adobe Press exam that is attached to each of their classroom in a book books. Your portfolio really reflects your creative aptitude, your technical ability when it comes to the design field. But some students like to have the little digital badge or a little certificate for the completing the Adobe Press process. Peach Pit does it, Pearson does it right through their website. It's a couple of bucks, but some students are interested when they're done with VisCom with going ahead and doing those certification processes. Like I said, your portfolio, what we produce in the class, what you put together as a capstone portfolio at the end of your associate degree or bachelor degree, that's really the reflective kind of representation of your technical ability and your creative aptitude. So certificates and digital badges aren't as much relevant, but it is a nice thing to show an employer if you might be already work in field and you're looking for a promotion or something like that, or maybe you don't work in field, but at your full-time job, there's a need for someone in the creative department, the marketing department, the graphic design kind of position. Sometimes having a completion badge or certificate might be something nice to show to the hiring manager, the marketing manager, creative director. But just know we follow this process for Graphic Design 1, Graphic Design 2, and VisCom because we want the end goal to be that we've met the outcomes of the book. We've built some projects that are portfolio based that showcase the practical knowledge, the technical ability, and also kind of an understanding of the creative process. So that's why Hodges, that's why design, that's why we do it this way. So you're going to notice learning module 1 is Photoshop, learning module 2 is Illustrator, learning module 3 is InDesign, and learning module 4 is a post-course assessment. It's the same process as graphic design last month. We're just building upon the skill sets. It's kind of like riding a bike. You learn it, and then the more you ride it, the better you get. And now maybe you feeling like you can take your hands off the handlebars and just pedal and balance yourself. That's the process with any technical skill set. The more you practice, the more often you practice, the better you get. I've been really happy with the progression of our student cohorts, with how they're learning the technical ability as we navigate through the more umbrella courses, graphic design 1, graphic design viscom, and the more granular processes like digital animation class and digital illustration class and advertising design and multi-page and designing with type, where we're really dealing with a specific skill set in the design field. So really great job the last few sessions, learning both those macro skills and those micro skills. And we're going to keep building upon those in these 4 weeks. We're going to dive in, do some more follow along stuff, and really start to push how we explore using the technical software that's appropriate for the application. So obviously Photoshop is raster based, it's picture based, it's pixel based. So we're going to be doing image blends, image collages, things that are photo based that would have a practical application in the career field. So let's just take a quick look and we'll scroll down. Everyone should know and be comfortable with accessing digital book and downloading the student files. And you'll notice that module 1 is Photoshop chapters. 5 is kind of a bit of a refresher. 9, 10, and 13 kind of dive us into some of the more advanced skills in your Photoshop book. Some that are newer to the program hopped on board when we were in the migration to the 2021 edition. So we're continuing those chapter assignments. If by chance we do have some students that kind of have lingered along from a different cohort when we were in 2018, if you have a 2018 book that you've been using kind of all along, I'm okay with the 2018 or the 2021. They do swap the chapter assignments a little bit. So if you go into like Amazon and you take a look at the table of contents of 2018 and 2021, you may notice a couple of chapters that got swapped. So you may be looking and saying, oh, chapter 9 is animated GIFs. Let me go to my Photoshop chapter 2018 and see which one's the animated GIFs and do that assignment. I've allowed students, as we migrate from one edition to another, if they have an older edition, I'm okay with you doing the same skill sets. The books kind of update the client projects a little bit, but they're teaching the same skills, and they traditionally kind of just swap around the chapters a little bit based on kind of the learning and the kind of application of the skill that they're trying to teach, kind of in the order that's best to teach it. So whatever works best for you works best for me. Just remember, in Photoshop world, I need a PDF of your finished project. It's fine to give me a PSD, just know based on your internet upload speed, we only know how long that might take from an upload standpoint. So just make it easy on yourself and do a PDF. It's a nice flattened file for upload. It's a little quicker upload, and the preview window should show us 100% final output of what your layers look like flattened into a static image. So just remember, I always like to pop every once in a while a chapter quiz. It is not timed. You can take your time, you can take notes, you can highlight things in your book, whatever the best practice is. I'm not trying to trick you. I just want you to learn the industry terminology as we're kind of learning the technical skill set from each of the chapters. So, because when you're interacting with a client, a marketing manager, a creative director, maybe a team member in a marketing firm, you just want to make sure that you kind of understand the terminology that someone might be using as you're talking about a project. So with resolution and bleeds and crop marks and just all kinds of different terms that we kind of tackle as we kind of navigate through some of these technical skills. I want you to know the terms. That way you feel more comfortable and appropriate when you're talking with a client, a team member, a creative director, a marketing manager, that you're talking the same lingo. It's kind of like anything when you're doing a job and you have a certain kind of skill set or a certain kind of job you're doing. There's always terminology that's specific to that job, and design is no different, whether it's software application or kind of creative application or kind of explaining your process or the finished product. There are just certain terms that we use in industry, and your book is really good at highlighting those terms. So I don't pop up too many quizzes very often. Normally in graphic design 1, graphic design, and viscom, I try to do 1, maybe 2 each session just to make sure that we're kind of reviewing, taking a look at the key bolded, italicized, the call outs, the different things you see under the pictures that are labeled. So everyone's kind of following and learning the same things. And of course, 1.9 is all about sharing something that you thought might have been cool as you've kind of been learning these more advanced Photoshop skills. Make sure you share a website, an image, a topic, something that you maybe thought was cool, because peer-to-peer learning is a really great way to reinforce. Remember, a lot of what we do isn't in a bubble. We're designing, interacting with clients and managers and other designers and copywriters and marketing people and business professionals. So you want to be able to learn, cross-pollinate, kind of cross-learn, share ideas, talk about what you are comfortable with, and others will talk about what they're comfortable with in design and business and marketing, and you'll kind of cross-learn. Designers as a whole kind of have this big umbrella skill set where the more you can add to your kind of toolkit, your technical toolkit, the more marketable you are, the more valuable you are to a client or a company. So just kind of keep that in mind. The discussion boards are just a way to kind of share thoughts, processes, practices, what you've learned, what you found. We're lifelong learners. I'm a lifelong learner. So I try to keep that same process even today. I have a design business. I juggle 3 or 4 clients at a time. I teach full time. I'm always looking to see what's happening in industry, what the greatest marketing trends and branding things are, and that sort of thing, because I want to stay fresh too. And design is global. So what's happening overseas in Europe, or what's happening in Asia or South America, those trends are applicable here too. And just keep in mind, this is a global kind of profession and process. So you can potentially have clients around the globe. So you just want to make sure that you're kind of learning as you go. There's no such thing as perfection. You're always going to get better. And so just keep that in mind and kind of keep that as part of your process. Just about everyone I have in class, when we get to the VisComm level, have found some level of love for some skill set they're learning. And so let's just keep that going as we become lifelong learners. And if you find something you really navigate towards, or something you really love, then we can kind of attach to that and we can learn more about it. You're always going to learn. There's always going to be a new software application, a new technique, a new trend, new things, new ways people are marketing and branding and communicating. So you just kind of keep up with the topic. So the discussion board or the topic shares are a really great way to do that. So don't skip them. And I do that pitch every semester because it's valuable points. So let's take advantage of those points and make the most of it. So we have 4 chapter assignments, we have a quiz, and we have a topic share. And that brings us to our out of book project. It's all about Photoshop. It's all about creating a wallpaper, you know, that background desktop graphic, this particular session using Photoshop. So we want to kind of showcase what we know, how comfortable we are, how we manipulate images, what we do with those images, kind of our creative problem solving using Photoshop. So we're going to basically create 2 desktop wallpapers or image posters, kind of image collaging our thoughts, ideas, practices of future city, right? It could be utopian, it could be a wasteland, it could be any number of things that you think kind of what the future city will look like. 2030, 2040, 2050, the year 3000. It's a fun project. You can kind of push your imagination any way you want using the skill sets you've learned, created, practiced in Photoshop. There isn't a right or wrong answer, but we want to make sure that we showcase our technical and creative aptitude in Photoshop, creating a really, and I said, awesome and unique creative vision, something different, right? We want to target, I don't know, maybe 18 to 32-year-olds, male or female, maybe fantasy or sci-fi fans. For me, I'm thinking 2 images. One is going to be rainforest or overly green or hyper growth kind of future city. And the other for me would be like wasteland. So super dry, super barren. Think of like Mars with houses on it, maybe people walking around, but it requires oxygen, some kind of suit of some kind. So to me, there's kind of 2 worlds. We kind of have rising sea levels. in essence, that's how you see this, right? New York City, but Statue of Liberty, part of it's underwater, part of it's over here, the body's over here, just kind of a creative, kind of interesting way of exploring what the potential future city may look like. And maybe it's not on this planet, maybe it's on another planet. Maybe you're thinking that trip to Mars is going to be successful and we're going to put some kind of base station there with people and vehicles and hydroponics and growing our own plants. What I like to do when I'm doing this kind of creative process is to kind of get an idea image-wise of what I envision as a completed image, all the parts of the completed image, gather those parts and then start laying them out based on the positive and negative space of each shape. And so I'm going to go into Photoshop and we're going to play around a little bit and build our first image of our future city, or, year 3000. What does it look like? What does our city look like? Unfortunately, I won't be around to see it, but maybe I can kind of cast my idea of what I think it might be like, right? So we're going to be 12 by 18. You're going to notice I wrote 12 by 18. So I was envisioning it in landscape format, not portrait format. But if you envision it vertically and not horizontally, it's okay to do kind of a vertical interpretation of it. Wallpapers or desktop images are traditionally 16 by 9, which means landscape orientation. So remember, it's a PSD file with multiple layers, but you'll save a PDF for me in high resolution, 300 DPI or 300 PPI, and upload it to our assignment. The 4 chapter assignments, the little chapter book quiz, that's self-explanatory. I thought we'd take a little time talking about blocking in, problem solving, the first of 2 images for your out-of-book project. If you follow along with me, if you create something as the foundation for your first image, then you'll have, in essence, almost 50% of your final project done. So hopefully, if not, and you're just listening to me and you want to go back later and watch it and do it then, or maybe you just want to watch it recorded later, I'm okay with any of those 3 things from above. Just be aware that I try to talk through my creative process, especially when I'm tackling out-of-book assignments, just to kind of give you my professional outlook of how I've done it over the last 25 plus years of professional design application, just to give you my thought process, how I've grown, how I've learned, how I've kind of modified my process as I've done client after client after client. Okay, gang, just taking a little sip of my tea as we're kind of getting going here. So remember, I'm recording this, so it'll be a Zoom link in our announcement section later in the evening that you can watch back as recorded. So let's go in here. I'm just going to open up a new window. Let me minimize this Zoom thing so I can get that out of the way. Remember, we're kind of doing some high resolution image manipulation. So we want to make sure we use some really high quality images, whether you take your own photos or you go out and do an internet search for photos. Make sure you're picking really high resolution images. Don't be picking little 400 pixel wide images, because they're not going to work in our wallpaper format as well. So I thought I would go in and I'm envisioning like a wasteland. So I've got to grab, I'm going to do 2/3, 1/3, which means like 1/3 land wasteland and like 2/3 maybe sky wasteland. That way I can kind of split my image in 2/3, 1/3. I want to have some textured of dried crackling material. So I'm already in my brain thinking, well, what part of my image, if it's 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 sky, 1/3 wasteland, I need to look for an image that has 1/3 land, and then look for some images that maybe are 2/3 sky, just so I can start manipulating and blending together the 2/3, 1/3 concept, leading my image selection down to what I envision on paper, what I sketched out on paper. I don't want the images to fit and then figure out the concept. I want to have the concept and then figure out how the images might fit the concept. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this first image here. So let's grab this thing. see if we can find something here. Let's go back. Let's donate this little, let's download this little image, baby. So I'm going to drop that on the desktop. So that's my 1/3 land. And now I need 2/3 like dreary looking sky. So I need something that looks like it's a wasteland. Like this is not a pretty looking thing that's going on. And remember, it's 2/3, 1/3, and it's landscape. So I need the image to be in landscape format that I'm looking for. So I'm just scrolling through. I saw an image or two up the top there that I think might work, but I just want to make sure that there isn't a little something a little further down that might also work. We're kind of getting in, boy, that's a beautiful nighttime sky. We're trying to get into this kind of dreary yellowish kind of wasteland image. This one isn't exactly 2/3 sky, so it would work, but it would require a little bit of upscaling, I think, in order to make it work. So I don't know if that's the best solution or not. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to go a little bit further. If I don't find exactly what I'm looking for, I'm going to go back up towards the top, because there were some really kind of dreary skies up here that I thought kind of could be interesting. I think I'm going to grab kind of this dreary looking sky here. So let's grab this one. So I've got this yellowish halo that I'm going to add to my wasteland kind of building setup that I have going on. So let's drop that one there. I want to see if I can find, so this is a really great image of kind of like a skeleton and kind of gives me that Mars looking effect. So I'm building background to foreground. So I'm just trying to see what kind of wasteland-ish background elements can get. I'm trying to stay in the same color palette, kind of the oranges and yellows and browns. I'm trying to make sure that it has elements that I can manipulate and play with. Some of these dunes are kind of interesting that I might be able to blend into my image a little bit. So let's pull that one down too, just so that we have something to layer in. You'll notice by my New York City image that I've got all kinds of stuff going on. Camels are kind of interesting, aren't they? As far as a wasteland goes. So I'm just looking at the different textures and patterns. Here's some kind of footprints and stuff that are still in the yellowish brown palette. So I'm going to take a look at what I have going on here. So let's drag these, and I'm only going to build the background first, just so that you can see kind of my thought process and what goes through in my creative process. So I'm going to create new. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do 12. I want to make this 18 wide, 12 high, go with 300. So I have my basic image here. So now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to start layering my my elements. So the first thing I need is the wasteland image, which is going to be my bottom building layer. So I'm going to go ahead and select all and copy it. I can close this and paste it in here. And you're going to notice that it pretty much fills the entire screen. It's okay if you got to do a tiny little upscale like that to get us into 300. I'm going to turn off my transforms. I'm going to go in here. Let's see my magic wand. Let's see if I can just grab some of this sky. So let's zoom in. So I got most of it, right? So I'm going to go into my lasso now, and I'm going to go into minus. Actually, I'm going to go in and use plus. So let's go in and plus, because I want to add the rest of my wasteland here. So I'm going to go in and just grab the edge of this mountainside, and I'm going to loop around. And let's see what we have here. Actually, you know what? Let's go in, and I'm going to invert this. So I'm actually going to invert my selection here. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. I forgot I selected my sky first. So let's use spacebar. So we have to remove the elements that we don't want to include in the sky. So there we go. We have to add this stuff up here. All right, so that's pretty good, but we need to, let's see what we have going on here. We got to add, we got to subtract our mountainside here. So let's make sure that and this is a really soft image, so I'm just going in with my lasso tool because I can do a pretty good job of just kind of cleaning up the edge of this thing. I'm going to be blending the sky behind it. So let's go in and get kind of the basic edges of this mountainside cleaned up. Only take me a couple of seconds here, not too much, but I want to kind of get that done. So, okay, so we got a little bit on the other side of this building here, right? So let's add to our selection this little tiny bit, and then we got to subtract from our selection this little tiny bit. All right, we're in pretty good shape. And so now we selected the sky. I see a little bit over here I got to clean up. It doesn't have to be perfect because I am I'm blending my two images together to give me my basic background. So let's just do that. I could have used the pen tool and traced along the edge of this probably pretty quickly too. It's preference as to your selection technique, what you're doing. So let's zoom out of there. Let's invert our selection. So there it is. And let's save our selection. So let's save our selection as wasteland. And now we have our selection masked. So we'll go ahead and click OK and save that. Let's go in here. Let's make sure that we have this all selected. Looks pretty nice. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring that as its own thing in here. So we have that. So now let's go in and we're going to open up the next one, which would be our sky. So we're going to open up our sky, and I'm just doing my problem solve. Now you're going to notice that I want the yellow kind of from this sky. So, honestly, we probably can just do a big selection. And let's go in here real quick, and I'm going to remove a little bit because I'm actually going to make sure that the sky disappears behind our landscape. So I'm going to copy that, go in here, paste it, zoom out. And so you'll notice there is my sky. So I need to just do an ever so slight upscale of this. So there it is. All right, so let's go ahead and name this our wasteland. Let's name this our sky. So I'm kind of problem solving as I go, kind of what this landscape is going to look like, right? So I can close this. But I already have the vision in my head of kind of what this thing is going to look like. So I'm just I know what I want it to look like, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't take the images I found based on my thought process, kind of what I want this thing to look like. So let's select the sky, and let's do a select inverse, copy this. Some of it's more plan than it is actual technical skill set, right? So let's drop something like that in. I'm going to go in here. Let's just see what we have. I'm going to soften this up a little bit so it blends into the background. And then I'm going to take my eraser tool and let's make it fuzzy and big. And I'm going to blend it in to the background. That way, if I decide to crank this up a little bit, it looks like it's just blending into the hillside. All right, so let's go in. And I kind of already have this plan in my head. So I've used that one. I've used that one. These are all just my background elements, right? So I've got another image I deemed a background image, which is this kind of funky thing going on. So let's see what it looks like. I don't know what of it I'm going to use. So why don't we just take a big rectangular selection out of that, and let's bring it, and we're going to drop it down. So now we have a slightly different texture. So you got this little person kind of wandering along. Let's see if we can't make this person. So let's crank down the opacity so I can see where it's overlapping and everything, right? So you can see that building there. And so those are things I want to soften up. So I'm going to go ahead and let's take our eraser tool. So I'm going to soften the sky. I'm going to soften that. I'm going to crank down my brush size because I want to pull forward the building. So you'll be able to see it 100%. And so now I can play around with my opacity. So you see how I can pull forward that. So I want to have a little bit of the dunes, the 100% this. You can see the guy kind of disappearing off into the distance. And so I think other than the skeleton, I've used my background elements. So I'm going to go in here and open. Let's grab the skeleton guy and let's just see. Let's see what we can do here. So let's go to here. Let's do select and mask. And let's just see. Let's see what we have here. Crank down. So here's my little thing here. So I want to select this thing. And so I'll start by just grabbing a big section of this thing. And then I can go back and clean it up a little bit later once I get the basic selection done. I just want to make sure that we have the basics selected here. And so now let's get in. I kind of have the basic kind of skull thing going on here. And so let's just go in and I'm just going to clean up a little bit of this image here. So let's go back in here and let's remove a little bit of that background. All right, so now we got it. And now let's duplicate our layer. Let's bring it over to our untitled. And so here's our little skeleton guy kind of cropped out. And I'm going to kind of just bleed him off the page so you can kind of see him, but you're not exactly sure what he is. Just kind of drop him in there. Move him up to the top so he's up there. All right, so I have the basic elements. Now remember, I can trash these once I get my background created because the layers are in my Photoshop layers. So let's go ahead and do a save as and save to my computer. And I'm going to do McElroy Viz Comm underscore out of book 1. Save that, dump it down. All right, so I had this concept that there would be maybe some Mars-ish kind of stuff, like maybe an astronaut or something. So let's type in Mars first. And you should notice I'm going to turn on my rulers. I'm trying to kind of not split this thing in half. So I'm trying to, when I make my astronaut, I want him to be like over here somewhere, maybe the tree off in the distance, kind of only up to here. So we have like predominantly a 2/3 foreground image with some 1/3 background element. So I can close this one actually now too, because I already duplicated it. So let's go back. So what do we got from Mars? We've got a great image of the rover, which would be kind of cool in our collage. My original idea was some kind of spacesuit guy. So this is interesting because it's already muted in color palette and my image is already muted. So these people from a color palette standpoint would really work well in my image that I'm trying to create. The only trick is, I want them to be big in the image, like these people are. The smaller they are, like these, the less scale-wise, like these are really small, they will when they place in my image. So I have to have big people like this. And so let's just make sure there aren't any bigger versions of kind of the astronaut people. And I want them in the muted colors. I want them so they kind of will naturally blend into my image. If I was building this for my client and I was building a detailed thing, I might take an image and just place a big boulder too. I'm only using a few elements from each of my conceptual elements just to give you an idea of the creative process. But with that being said, creating it for a project, you want to layer a bunch of images, a bunch of elements, a bunch of concepts into your concept to really kind of showcase your technical skill set. So just make sure that you're really developing your concept as you're building it. And so here are my astronaut people. Now, one thing you'll know is this thing is already muted. So I'm going to think about going in here and just including the background and cutting these people in, because I think I might be able to use multiple layers and bring these, see how big they are? I want them to be big like this. I want them to be big like this. So when I soften this up a little bit, so you can see the images behind them, I want them to take up a primary kind of major portion, 2/3 or more of the image as I'm kind of creating when I create here. So I built from background to foreground because I want to make sure when I cut this stuff out that I have some kind of detailed information in the background to complete this concept. So let's go into our kind of our magnetic lasso and let's kind of see how it does following along this astronaut. So I'm just doing different techniques for you guys. So you have the pen tool, you have different selection techniques for cutting these people out, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. I just have to get a basic selection done so that I can always subtract or add as I need to based on what we have going on here. So I'm just going to loop around this astronaut real quick, just so you can see different techniques. And it's kind of based on what I'm doing, what my client needs are, what the effect is that I'm going for based on how I want to kind of cut this guy out. And you'll notice it's not going to do perfect. And I'm going to have to go back in and clean it up a little bit, but it at least gives me a starting point for kind of cutting this team of astronauts out. So I'm just kind of following along. All right, so there it is. Let's get in here and we're going to add to our selection a little bit, some of the easy things to add. I'm just going to circle them, holding down the shift key just to get the basics selected. Just to get the basics selected. So we got a little bit, a couple of elements. I'm kind of blending this thing in to the background. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but I need the basic elements so I can feather this thing in. It's kind of this surreal thing we got going on. So let's hit the minus. I'm gonna cut the background out of his arm. And I've traced with my hand a long time using the mouse. So I could have used a pen tool. I could have used masking techniques like we've used in other classes. It's just whatever's most comfortable for you. So let's do a slight feather on this thing and copy it. And I'm just going to paste it just so that so let's do an edit copy. Let's see what we got going on here. Make sure that we're in this. Yeah. let's make sure that, so we have that kind of locked in as our layer there. Let's make sure everything is locked in. Let's save our selection. I'm just going to name it Astro. And let's do our selection mask. So let's crank this up just so you can kind of see what's going on. And get it placed in. All right, so now we have a pretty good cutout of this thing. So now the trick is, like, how do we want to place this thing? You know, how do we want this thing to interact with our elements? Let's drop that in there, which means our skull might be a problem. We might need to move this over just a skosh. All right, so now we got our astronauts in there. We've got our, so let's name it Astro. Astro original. This is footprints. This is dunes. All right, this was our original background layer. It's kind of our original background layer. Background original. And you'll notice I'm trying to keep things in a similar kind of yellowish color palette. And yeah, when I hide this, you don't see as much of this anymore, but it's important to think in layered details because it gives you more flexibility. Like if I decided I wanted to move these way down here, I get more of that there. Like I have more options if I think in a full layered environment. And I got to think in a bleed environment. So if I want to pull that all the way off the page, I want to make sure there isn't a weird nook. See how that nook is by his waist. If I want to take him completely off, I want to make sure I remove that nook. And remember, we can do effects and different things kind of as we get going. If I soften these guys a little bit, just the slightest amount, like 8%, now look, it really takes that kind of muted color palette and washes it through the astronauts as well. So I'm trying to create kind of a finished story as I'm kind of navigating through here. So I'm thinking a tree, maybe kind of a desolate tree somewhere over here. I need something to kind of tie this thing together as my thought of year 3000, wasteland, Mars, AK, primitive kind of living environment. So I'm just trying to problem solve my different elements. I knew what I wanted for the background. I kind of knew the foreground element I wanted. Now I've got to dream up some of my kind of middle ground elements that I'm creating for this storytelling. Now, I will tell you that when I'm thinking about it, and we've talked about this in other classes, I would think about making a duplicate copy of the astronauts, crank that up to 100%, see how shiny they are, and then go in and remove some of the elements that I don't want to be shiny. So let's say I wanted only part of their suits to be shiny, right? So then I want to mute out the helmets. So you see that? And maybe the cape. And so now watch when I go in, and I'm going to do, how do I want to boost this thing up? I want to kind of boost it up a little bit just so that you can see the parts that I cranked up. So see how bright their suits are? So if I crank that up a little bit, so now you see how it disappears and it's only certain parts of it are highlighted. And so now watch what happens if I take this and I make a copy of this and put it on top. So I'm going to name this one Astro Highlight. Now this copy, let's go in and let's adjust maybe color balance. So what if we like So you see what I'm doing? I'm playing around with the colors that would be most appropriate. So I'm going to crank up the red. I'm going to crank up the yellow. And so now you can see how it's even more highlighted? Well, what part would I really want to glow on them? And I'm going to remove the rest. So I'm going to make just the upper parts of their body glow. And so now you can see that it's only that. So let's also get rid of the helmet glow. And so now you can really see what I'm trying to do with the astronauts. And it's 3 layers, right? So there's the highlight, or let's name it Astro Yellow Glow. And then the highlights of the astronauts. So you can see the layers that I've developed here. So I actually want to get rid of that part too. And then the finished part. And so now you can see 3 layers to create really the true effect that I want with the astronauts. And I would actually go in and do that with my wasteland too. So remember, this is my wasteland down here. So watch what happens if I make a duplicate copy of this. Image adjust. Let's go in and also maybe let's do brightness contrast. So watch what happens when I crank this way up. So big contrast. So see the difference? And so now I'm going to go with my eraser tool. I'm going to use a really big brush and I'm going to tap it behind the skeleton and over here by the people. So you're going to notice it's only highlighted by the house now. So look at the difference that made. So I'm really starting to get a hyper saturation of my image using a layering technique. And I also have my dunes. So there they are right now. So what if I made a duplicate copy of them? So there are the dunes, right? Let's go in and and I only want to brighten it for the tips of the dunes. So you see how I'm brightening the tip of the dune? So you can see it right here. See how it's bright up there? And now I'm going to take my eraser tool and I'm going to only allow the very top of the dune to be highlighted. So look at the difference. It gives it just a little punch that wasn't there before. And watch what happens if I duplicate that again. Look how bright it gets. See how it doubles it and makes it even more bright? So I'm going to do dune highlight and dune highlight copy. So there it is. And so now I'm really pushing this saturation, this dreamy. Gosh, I need something. I don't want to do a pyramid or something crazy like that because I have the building already here. So let's go back into our Mars and see if there's anything in Mars. Oh, that might be interesting that I did not select. I don't know. Let's see if there's any kind of thing I might be able to include for Mars that could be on the top of my dune or somewhere in my wasteland area that would be cool or interesting or different. Remember, it's got to be kind of a wasteland-ish image. The flag would actually be cool. But it's got to have that yellowish. It can't be these. If I wanted to do this technique, I should have selected background images that are more toxic, less muted for my collage. And so I'm just looking. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to give it a few minutes, see if I can find anything that really truly fits the composition that I'm going for. I'm not really seeing much. So I wonder if I can go back to desert tree or something like that. I need yellowish, I need muted, I need something that works. See the photography, how that's a muted filter? I'm looking for something that would work muted. This actually would be pretty good as trees go because it's already kind of muted. This little wasteland tree here, I think they called it Joshua tree. So let's download that. And I'm going to drag that over. I'm going to minimize that for now because I don't know if I've got the whole story I'm trying to tell here. Let's add this tree in. Oh, let's make our tolerance like 200. See if I can get, let's go 30. See if I can get this tree without having to sweat over it too much. Let's do 50, see if we can add to this thing. Make it a little easier on myself. Remember, it's going to be small, and this is a pretty high resolution image. So I just need to get the gist of it, quite honestly. So let's zoom in. Just for the sake of the process, let's get in here and kind of select the edge of this tree without really overly killing myself. All right, so that's the tree for the most part. Let's add a little bit along the trunk here. And I'm just proud. I know what the application is, the level of detail I'm doing, and what parts really matter in the image, because I can do my layering technique. I can grab the parts that, and this is kind of a clump that's going to be kind of sitting on my dunes, and I'm probably going to blend that into so let's remove that part. We're in pretty good shape here. Let's get the gist of the inside of this tree, just so that it's not too speckled when the image is collaged together. So we'll kind of add the gist of the basic main meat and bones of this tree. Zoom out. All right, we got the gist of it. Let's copy it. I think I could really use some of those boulders too, honestly. Look at this. So see how I just kind of dumped this in? So here he is, the tree. I want to move that off to the side. But you see what happens when it was below the astronauts? I could have just stuck it back here somewhere, and it could have been a pretty interesting element, like right about there. But I'm going to move it off. My idea was to have it over here somewhere to kind of tie together this area. And you'll notice the wasteland, it is a little powerful. It's not as saturated with the yellows. So I'm going to crank down my opacity a little bit to let the background interact with this thing. And then I'm going to make a duplicate copy of it to punch it up a little bit. You know, that part to kind of punch it up a little bit. I'm going to erase the top part of the tree because I only want the trunk. Oh, I only want the trunk to be like really, really bright. So there's the trunk. So now you can see only the bottom of this thing. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust the brightness and contrast, move this out of the way so I can see it. I'm really going to punch up this tree trunk. And so see how it's still muted, but now the tree trunk kind of gives it a little depth, a little bit of richness of dark color. So it ties into some of the richness of dark color elsewhere. All right, so I'm doing pretty good here. Let's see what we got. This is my skull thing. I need to maybe mute this thing out a little bit. It's too rich color-wise. So let's do color balance. Let's try. I'm going to try to tint this thing a little bit like that, just so it's a little more muted, like it looks like it really truly blends in with this image. So I'm really starting to get a detailed image here. Really starting to kind of build this story of this wasteland. I do want to have some wasteland texture that kind of crackles in this thing behind the astronauts, kind of some middle ground texture. So let's go back in, and I need to get the wasteland kind of texture. And I remember the crackle image. So you see this one here. I think this one might be a good one. I think that's the best of the crackles because it does have a yellow hue to it. A lot of these more deserty images start getting a little too black and white, or, wow, that's an interesting image. Let's see what we have here. I just want to make sure that, oh man, I love some of these ripples. I really could go crazy on this image and bring a bunch of sand images in that are high contrast and really do some fun play with this thing. I mean, I could layer 50 versions of that sand with all different high contrast kind of stuff, like high contrast dunes and ripples and textures. And I could really go crazy with this thing, but for the sake of the lecture, I always like try to keep the lecture at like an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. So I can't go too crazy with the layers. Now you should recognize this thing is kind of asymmetric, kind of crackle. So I can rotate this thing any direction I want. It really doesn't matter. I want to keep it in a landscape format so that when I bring it in, I want to put it behind the astronauts. And so here's my texture. And I'm going to scale it up just a skosh because I'm going to blend it in anyway. So I'm going to scale it up so it fits. And here's my texture here, and watch. I'm going to crank the opacity down just so that you can see what I have going on. And so you can really see the texture elements here. And I actually want to just texture down here so you can see what I got going on. And so there it is. I'm going to turn off the show transform controls, and I'm going to play around with the level of texture I need in order to get this thing crackling. So I'm checking my order. So let's see how far. So you see how you see the texture right there? Watch if I crank it up. You can really, that's exactly what I want. See the texture, but it's sitting behind the other elements. And so now if I went in, I think I want to just ground that skull a little bit. So you see the texture, it's right there. Watch if I duplicate it. It brings it up a little bit to the foreground. And then I'm going to disappear it into the edge there. And I know it's a subtle thing. You can barely see this thing, right? You can barely see this thing, but it's important to the level of detail I'm trying to put into my image to make it tell a really robust story, a really dramatic story. So it takes this layering of, I mean, look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I'm at like 17 layers. I could easily do 30 layers in this image, multiple dunes, multiple buildings, multiple layers of the same tree, multiple layers of the astronaut. I'm just trying to build this Photoshop driven technical sound ability to tell really a very overly sci-fi, fantasy, dramatic wallpaper, right? This is a wallpaper. So this thing is going to be huge on someone's computer. Look how big it is already, right? Look at the detail in this thing. It's only 33%. If I save this as my wallpaper, it would be this highly detailed, stretched out 3,000 pixel wide image that really is very dramatic. When you work for companies that produce wallpapers that they throw out on the internet because they want people to brand their computers with their product or service, they're working in this kind of Salvador Dali, multiple layer, multiple image, overly dramatic image collage so that you get the utopian surreal kind of surrealism, super realistic kind of image collage, right? That's what we're looking for, that dream quality. You can't do it in really like 3 pictures, 5 layers. You need to create 20 layers, maybe 25 layers, and really play around with effects and shadowing and glowing and blurring and blending and feathering and all of those things. But remember, before Photoshop, you gotta have a plan. Don't let Photoshop be the plan. Don't let just finding pictures and how they come into the image be the plan. Have a background collage concept. Have a middle ground of elements planned out. Have the foreground story thought about and conceptualized before you get into your Photoshop image selection, your layering, your blending, your actual final composition. Remember, it's 80% thought, 20% production. In some cases, 90% thought, 10% production. So you just want to make sure that the concept is sound, that you've thought of about all the layers of elements, that you thought about visual spacing, that you thought about visual hierarchy, that you thought about the concepts of the foreground elements, the middle ground elements, and the background elements, and that you also thought about color palette, color hue, saturation, contrast, color mode. All of these things are important to make sure that you build a story that is concise, that is something that tells a story, and something that blends and works together. You notice I didn't bring any black and white images into this. I stayed in my soft sand earth tones. I let my layers blend together to tell the story. If I duplicated an object more than one time, it was to adjust the brightness, contrast, the color balance, the hue, the saturation, so that I'm over enhancing my elements to tell the same story. You want to make it feel like this could have been photographed in a scene in natural light in a way that would be a surreal or utopian moment. Now, I'm down to my last elements. I've got my story told. Now I just got to figure out if there's any one last little element, any one last little graphic that might kind of finish off my story. And I think I need it to be something in the sky over there. So I'm wondering if I can't put a planet or some moon or something up here that I could saturate and kind of blend in. So I don't know, let's do moon and see. Oh my gosh, there are so many beautiful images in moon. Now, right now, if I go black and white here, I need to make sure that I adjust my image in hue and saturation to make sure that I override the black and white with some yellows, some golds, some things that would work with my image, and any of these would work actually. So just for the sake of the process, let's do a black and white, right? Because we want to make sure we're telling the same story here. So let's open this baby up in Photoshop. Let's do inverse our selection. So there's our basic moon. And I need this to be up in the sky, but I need it to be behind probably the tree and the astronauts just to be on the safe side. So here's my moon. Now, I don't think the moon should be that big if we're on Mars, but I also want to have the options to do some different things with this. So I can hide it behind a helmet. So let's first just crank it back a little bit so it starts to collect the color palette of the sky just a little bit. And so let's name it moon. And then let's go in and adjust. Let's adjust our color palettes and bring some yellow into this thing. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just trying to make this thing feel like it should have been part of that sky. And so let's copy that. And let's do contrast. Move that out of the way so you can really see what I'm doing here. So I'm cranking up the brightness and contrast so that I can go in here. And I'm only going to contrast the right side of the moon. You can see it right there. And I'm going to group them. Name it moon. And what if I overlap this just a skosh to give it like a double moon effect? So you see what I got going on here? I'm just trying to find the best happy place. Should it be where the glow of the sky is? Should it be maybe over here so that it's as if there's a secondary light source? I think I'm going to put it somewhere over here, like right around there. Then we have 80%. Maybe I crank this down just a skosh. I crank this up a skosh so you really get the double moon effect. I'm just saving it. Now, it would be really crazy if I, let's do this. Let's merge layers and let's make a copy of this thing. Maybe in our world, there are two moons. And just to keep with the process, I'm going to put that one behind his helmet too. All right, so this thing is enormous, right? It's 8.33% at 300 dpi. This is a really high quality wallpaper or desktop image, right? This thing would really do the job. Right, this thing is enormous as resolution goes. It's 5,400 pixels wide. Most wallpapers are around 3,000 pixels. So this thing would be beautiful as a background or a desktop wallpaper. Now, it's not required that you do any kind of textual elements. If you want to, just make sure that they match the typography. So just for the sake of the process, because maybe I do want to do kind of a fun word play or something in the background. So let's do, let's go down maybe to this layer, and then let's use our text tool. And I'm just going to write planet, write planet. So here's my word planet that I want to put somewhere. I'm just looking to see how the thing might work. Let's go in here. I'm going to sample like a dark-ish color. I want to get it to be something that kind of matches in to the background. I need it to be that it fits the style of the image. So I need it to be kind of a modern-ish typeface, I think. So let's do like a Futura typeface. But look at how I'm interacting my type. Like if I'm going to use type, let's make sure that it has purpose. So what if I'm trying to figure out the best placement for this. So see how the moon interacts with the P? This kind of blends behind the moon. Let's get in here and do, let's do a texture. I have a crackle texture kind of already in here. So let's do a crackle texture. Play with the scale a little bit. And then let's crank the opacity down. I don't know. And then let's see. Let's do, what do I want to do here? Do I want to play an effect on it? Do I want to do a warp on this thing to kind of make it funky? Let's do just a quick little arch here. So let's do, I don't know, 50. Ooh, maybe too much. 25. Ooh, we're getting closer. 15. Yeah, that's pretty good. So now I kind of have this funky thing going on here. Playing with the circular kind of technique. Yeah, that's good. I don't know, I could move it over here too. Yeah, let's do that. Just kind of put it off in the distance here. I'm not in love with that, trying to find the right place for it, but I didn't plan on type in my sketch, my concept. So let's put it there. Okay, all right. Save that. Maybe we'll, so let's see here. Maybe we'll do a slight drop shadow, just to give it a little personality. But you'll notice I didn't drop shadow anything else. I just did the type to give it a little bubble-ish effect, kind of draw it off the page a little bit versus blending it completely in the background. So I'm just doing it just for play purposes. So I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go in here. Now that I have it done, I'm going to go in and file, save as. And I'll probably use some of the same techniques for the oversaturated rainforest jungle-ish environment, which could be our planet in the year 3000, right? It could be the planet in the year 3000. So let's go in here, do a Photoshop PDF. I want to flatten the layers. And smallest file size is fine for upload purposes. So let's crank that down. So let's just take a look at the difference here, right? This is why I wanted to do this. Let's get in here and get info. My Photoshop file is 736 meg. It's uploadable, but it's huge. And this is 294K. So just look at the difference. Still, look at the beauty of the PDF, right? Still beautiful. You can really see the layer saturation, the gold. You can see the blending of the crackle, the sharpness of the building, the blending of the skull, the textures of the dunes, everything, the double moons. Everything looks really good, but this could be uploaded from your phone. This would need your computer to sit for a few minutes in order to upload. So let's go back real quick. We're at our hour and 15 minutes or so lecture, kind of the window I want to keep for recording. Let's go back real quick and just quick recap of the project, right? It's 12 by 18. It's 300 DPI. It's a fantasy sci-fi future city of utopia or apocalypse image. Has to be created in Photoshop. You need 2 original images in 12 by 18. If it was me, I would do like 2 totally opposite things, like dry wasteland, rainy, super saturated rainforest. Or maybe you want to do what, maybe you want to do it by country, like what I think maybe Canada will look like in year 2030 or 3000 or 4000 versus Australia, or maybe you want to do US versus Russia, like however you want to do it, but try not to do the same concept kind of delivered 2 different ways. Push the envelope of the creativity of your aptitude for the process and see if you can't use the same process. Make the 2 images feel like they're part of a concept or a campaign, just opposite. Super dry, really wet. Desert, rainforest. Maybe you want a predominantly a sky theme or a space concept, and maybe you want underground as a concept, right? You want to do opposites in the spectrum and kind of see what you come up with, trying to make it a campaign or trying to make it feel like it could be 2 images or 2 collages that could be for one product or service, right? It could be gum, and the gum could be the wasteland and could also be the rainforest or the saturated. And I want to end the lecture with just a couple of cool images that I found just to inspire you in your Photoshop collage. I mean, just some really interesting images that were just blended in Photoshop using multiple pictures. This one's really cool with the ladder and the cloud and the little astronaut looking dude. Look at this one where all they did was take an image of this, flip it on its side, cut it on a diagonal, and it looks like a waterfall. Really kind of a simple process. Take this image, make a duplicate, copy it, rotate it, cut a 45. And that's how you get this drip technique. This one's pretty cool too, where they took a building, put little legs on it, and they made the power lines look like they're connecting to the building. So kind of utopian, kind of weird, destructive, different kinds of concept and images. I love this one. But hopefully an inspiration for you. And if you Google any of these processes or these images, you're going to get inspiration. So I love that this is a Tuesday class. I look forward to seeing your process. If you want to jot down your conceptual kind of layout prior to creating the first of your 2 wallpaper images for your out of book, maybe sketching on paper, you do a little doodle on the computer, please feel free, send me a JPEG, a GIF, a PDF of your concept, what you're thinking, and then I'll give you a little critique, a little advice, and then you can build your image. I was so happy with the final projects from Graphic Design 2 from each one of you that I think we're going to have some really cool processes and practices in image as we jump into Photoshop and VisComm Learning Module 1. Please let me know if you have any hiccups, any kind of challenges as you get started navigating through the content. And let's try, like we did last month, to keep Photoshop in week 1, all of Photoshop. Let's try to do it all in week 1. So meaning finish before next Tuesday at 6:30. Do all of Illustrator week 2, get all those projects done. If you can stay organized, stay on sequence, and stay in the software by the week, it really helps you when you get to week 4 and we're doing a project that encompasses all of the applications. If you're not overlapping projects, it allows you to really concentrate on the project at hand and gives you a really compact way of learning the process. So have a great week. Thank you so much for logging live online. If you logged live online, thank you for watching this recorded. Please make sure you watch this recorded. It answers a lot of questions and gives inspiration for the week's learning topics, and also kind of keeps us connected and on track. And P.S., don't forget your discussion topic share this week, because as you're conceptualizing your out of book project, you're collecting images, I am sure you're going to come across resources and inspiration that can inspire someone else. So please make sure you share it in our topic share. And also remember, we do have a little mini quiz. Take your time, go through the process, review the topics, take your time taking it. But remember, try to do that as part of week 1 so that you're not taking it while you're learning Illustrator advanced skills in week 2. Okay, Ken, have a great week. I hope you had a safe and happy 4th. We're kind of winding through the last couple of months of the summer session here, because we're going to, kind of start enjoying the summer, enjoying the weather, enjoying family and friends, but we're also trying to learn a few topics as well to kind of continue to add to your portfolio and your skill set. All right, gang, have a great week. Bye-bye.